Deep within the bowels of the earth, the underworld, a realm forgotten by time, slumbered beneath layers of rock and shadow. Its vast expanse, a desolate and eerie landscape, was illuminated only by the dim glow of ghostly flames that flickered along the banks of the river Styx. Here the ancient gods, long fallen from their thrones, had retreated into the depths, their once glorious forms now shrouded in darkness. Cronus, the ancient Titan, stirred from his ageless sleep, his eyes opening to the familiar gloom that had been his prison for millennia. He could feel the pulsating power of the underworld, a power that had lain dormant for far too long. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, stood at the threshold of her throne room, her gaze fixed on the shifting shadows that danced across the walls. She had ruled alongside Hades for centuries, her once vibrant spirit now dulled by the endless night. But with the awakening of Cronus, she sensed a change, a disturbance in the fabric of their world that heralded the return of something ancient and terrifying. The air grew heavy with the weight of forgotten memories, as if the very walls of the underworld were whispering secrets long buried. As Cronus rose from his stone slab, the earth trembled beneath his feet, sending ripples of fear through the souls of the damned who wandered the underworld's desolate plains. His once mighty form, though diminished by time, still carried the weight of his former glory. With each step he took, the shadows deepened, and the very essence of the underworld seemed to bow to his will. He knew that the time had come to reclaim what had been lost, to restore the dominion of the gods over a world that had forgotten their power. Persephone approached Cronus, her steps echoing in the silent halls. She had not seen the Titan since the days of the great betrayal, when the gods were cast down and their powers sealed away. Now, standing before him, she could see the determination etched into his ancient features, a resolve born of centuries of brooding in the dark. She knew that his awakening would signal the beginning of a new age, one that would plunge the mortal world into a darkness it had not known for eons. The underworld itself seemed to stir in response to Cronus's resolve, as if the very stones and rivers were awakening to their true purpose. The once still and silent waters of the river Styx began to churn, reflecting the tumult within the hearts of the gods who had been forgotten by the world above. Cronus and Persephone stood together, silent and resolute, knowing that the time had come to reclaim their dominion. The ancient powers that had once ruled the world would rise again, and with them, the world would fall into the inevitable darkness that had always been their fate. As Cronus and Persephone began to rally the ancient forces of the underworld, the first signs of their resurgence spread across the realm like a creeping shadow. The rivers of the underworld, once stagnant and silent, now roared with a newfound fury, their waters reflecting the anger and ambition of the gods who had been cast down. The souls of the damned, sensing the shift in power, cowered in fear, their ghostly forms trembling as the air grew thick with the scent of death and decay. Cronus, with Persephone by his side, began to summon the old gods. Their once forgotten names whispered through the dark corridors of the underworld, a call to arms for those who had been forsaken. Word of the gods' return spread beyond the underworld, reaching the ears of those who still worshipped in secret, their faith kept alive by ancient rites and forbidden rituals. In the mortal world, the sky darkened, and the earth trembled as the power of the underworld began to seep through the cracks in reality. Temples long abandoned and forgotten by time began to stir, their ancient stones vibrating with the force of the gods' awakening. Priests and priestesses, long thought mad for their devotion to the old ways, suddenly found themselves at the center of a growing cult, their prayers finally answered as the gods began to take back what was rightfully theirs. In the depths of the underworld, Cronus led Persephone to the heart of their realm, where the most ancient and powerful of the gods lay imprisoned. These were the first of the fallen, their might sealed away by the newer gods who had taken their place in the heavens. Cronus, with the strength of his resolve and the power of the underworld at his command, shattered the chains that bound them, freeing the titans and deities who had once ruled the cosmos. One by one they emerged from their prisons, their eyes burning with the fires of vengeance, ready to reclaim their dominion over both the mortal and divine realms. As the gods assembled, a council was formed in the heart of the underworld, where Cronus and Persephone presided over the gathering of ancient powers. Each god brought with them their own desires and ambitions, their own plans for how to reassert their authority over the world above. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the weight of centuries of betrayal and the burning desire for revenge. The gods knew that their return would not be welcomed by all, and that they would need to act swiftly and decisively to crush any resistance from the mortals and the younger gods who still held power. Persephone, though a queen in her own right, felt a growing unease as the council of gods plotted their return. She had ruled the underworld with a sense of balance, maintaining the delicate harmony between life and death. But now, with Cronus and the other gods ready to unleash their wrath upon the world, she feared what this resurgence would bring. The underworld itself seemed to groan under the weight of the power that was building, as if the very fabric of their realm was straining to contain the fury of the gods. Despite her doubts, Persephone knew that the path had already been set, and there would be no turning back from the darkness that was to come. As the council of gods convened in the heart of the underworld, the air grew thick with anticipation. Cronus stood at the centre, his voice booming through the cavernous hall as he declared the time had come to reclaim their dominion over the mortal realm. The gods, both old and new, listened with a mixture of reverence and fear, knowing that their actions would soon determine the fate of the world above. The walls of the underworld seemed to vibrate with the power that was building, a dark energy that pulsed in time with the beating of the gods' ancient hearts. Outside the council chamber, the underworld itself began to change. The once stagnant rivers now flowed with molten fire, and the skies above the underworld were filled with storm clouds crackling with dark lightning. The souls of the dead, who had long wandered aimlessly through the desolate plains, now gathered at the borders of the underworld, drawn by the overwhelming force emanating from the gods. The very fabric of the realm seemed to stretch and tear under the weight of their power, as the boundaries between the mortal world and the underworld began to blur. Persephone, standing at Cronus's side, watched as the gods prepared for their ascent. Her heart was heavy with doubt, for she knew that the world above was not ready for the wrath of the fallen pantheon. She could see the madness in the eyes of the gods, the burning desire for vengeance that had festered for centuries. Yet she remained silent, bound by the fate that had been woven long ago, when the gods had first fallen from grace. She could only hope that something, or someone, would intervene before it was too late. As the gods gathered at the threshold between the underworld and the mortal realm, Cronus raised his hand, and a massive portal of swirling darkness began to form. The portal crackled with energy, its edges lined with ancient symbols that glowed with a fiery intensity. The gods stood ready, their forms silhouetted against the blazing light of the portal, their eyes fixed on the world that awaited them. The moment had arrived, and with a single command, Cronus led the charge, stepping through the portal to reclaim the world that had forgotten them. But as Cronus and the gods stepped through the portal, a powerful force resisted their passage. The portal itself seemed to tremble, the dark energy within it struggling against the gods' advance. The earth shook, and the skies above the underworld darkened further, as if the realm itself was rebelling against their return. For a brief moment it seemed that the gods' plan might fail, that the forces of the world above would be enough to hold them back. But with a final surge of power, Cronus pushed through, breaking the barrier and leading the gods into the mortal realm, where their return would plunge the world into the darkness they had long sought. As Cronus and the gods emerged into the mortal realm, the world shuddered beneath their feet. The sky, once clear, was now cloaked in darkness, with the sun obscured by a thick veil of storm clouds. The gods moved with purpose, their forms towering and majestic, casting long shadows over the lands they once ruled. Their arrival was met with a mixture of terror and awe as mortals, sensing the return of the old powers, fell to their knees in reverence or fled in fear. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of their presence, as if struggling to bear the burden of the ancient beings who now walked its surface. The gods wasted no time in asserting their dominion, each one reclaiming the lands and followers that had once been theirs. Temples long abandoned were restored to their former glory, and ancient rituals were revived as the gods demanded worship from those who had forgotten them. Cronus, at the head of this divine resurgence, watched as the world began to reshape itself according to the will of the gods. Yet, even as their power grew, the mortal world resisted, with pockets of defiance rising up against the return of the fallen pantheon. The gods, however, were relentless, crushing any opposition with the overwhelming force of their might. Persephone, though a part of this resurgence, felt a growing disquiet. The world she had known, the balance she had helped maintain, was being torn apart by the wrath of the gods. She wandered through the lands, witnessing the devastation left in their wake, the once fertile fields now barren, the cities reduced to rubble, and the people living in fear of their new rulers. Despite her role as the queen of the underworld, Persephone could not shake the feeling that this was not the future she had envisioned. The return of the gods had brought darkness, not just to the world but to her own heart as well. As the gods tightened their grip on the mortal realm, a sense of unease began to spread among them. The world they had reclaimed was not as it once was, and their return had unleashed forces that even they could not fully control. The boundaries between the realms had weakened, allowing dark and ancient beings to slip through the cracks, creatures that had been banished long ago, now free to roam the earth once more. The gods, once confident in their power, now faced a new threat, one that had arisen as a consequence of their return. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unravelling, and with it, the gods' hold on the world. Cronus, realising that their victory might not be as certain as he had believed, began to see the price of their resurgence. The world was changing, slipping further into chaos with each passing day. The gods, once united in their desire for vengeance, now found themselves at odds as they faced this new and unforeseen danger. The darkness that they had brought into the world was not just physical, but also a creeping despair that threatened to consume everything they had fought to reclaim. As the world teetered on the edge of destruction, Cronus was forced to confront the possibility that their return might not have been a victory, but a catastrophic mistake. As the world continued to unravel, Cronus stood at the edge of a shattered mountain, overlooking the chaos that had engulfed the mortal realm. The once vibrant lands were now desolate and cold, with the sun forever hidden behind dark clouds. The gods had reclaimed their dominion, but at a cost far greater than any of them had anticipated. The power they had unleashed was now beyond their control, and the very fabric of reality was beginning to tear apart. Cronus, once so certain of their victory, now saw the full extent of their folly. The darkness they had brought upon the world was not a return to glory, but a descent into ruin. Persephone, having witnessed the devastation, returned to Cronus, her heart heavy with sorrow. She had tried to maintain balance, but the gods' thirst for vengeance had overwhelmed any hope of restoring the world to its former state. As she looked out over the ruins, she realized that the darkness they had unleashed would not be contained. It was spreading, seeping into every corner of the earth, corrupting all it touched. The underworld, too, was changing, its boundaries weakening as the darkness consumed it from within. Persephone knew that there was no turning back, that the world as they knew it was lost. As the gods gathered once more, it became clear that their return had set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The ancient beings that had been banished to the farthest reaches of the cosmos were now awakening, drawn by the disruption of the natural order. These entities, older and more powerful than even the gods, began to make their presence known, their influence spreading like a shadow across the world. The gods, once so mighty, now found themselves powerless to stop the tide of darkness that they had unleashed. Cronus, realizing that there was no hope of salvaging the world they had fought so hard to reclaim, made a fateful decision. He gathered the remaining gods and led them back to the Underworld, hoping to contain the darkness within their own realm. But as they descended, the darkness followed, consuming the last remnants of their power and sealing their fate. The Underworld, once a place of judgment and rest, became a prison for the gods themselves, a place where they would be trapped for all eternity, their power drained by the very darkness they had unleashed. The world above, now devoid of the gods' influence, fell into a perpetual night, with the sun never rising again. The mortals, left to fend for themselves, struggled to survive in a world where hope was a distant memory. The darkness, now a permanent fixture, continued to spread, consuming all in its path. But even in the depths of despair, there were whispers of a new beginning, a faint glimmer of light that hinted at the possibility of rebirth. Yet, the world would never be the same, forever marked by the return of the gods and the inescapable fate that had plunged it into darkness.